Welcome back to RGR. I'm Ryan. This is me going rogue, mostly, on the Kansas City Chiefs and the NFL. Got something different for you today. As part of the Locked On Network, we have a tendency to go back and forth with a lot of the other hosts for teams around the league, and this week is no different. I had a really interesting conversation with a team that I'm intrigued by in the Carolina Panthers, and their host, Bill Riccette, got to ask me questions. I asked him some as well. I wanted to share some of that with you because maybe some things came up that I haven't addressed in the past and in other interviews. So I'm going to put half of it on here. It's a straight Zoom video, not the best quality like I usually shoot at home, but I wanted to share it with you. And I want your opinion. This is kind of split. This is me answering questions, this first part, from him about the Chiefs, things that you've been squared in on. We've talked about this before. There's also a whole other section that is the opposite, about me trying to get intel on what the Carolina Panthers are doing, knowing that the Chiefs have to play them in 2020. So let me know what you think of this, and let me know if you want to see the other half of me getting information on the other team. I'm really intrigued by it. The podcast always does this. It's not always the most popular. I'm not sure if it's because fans just want to talk Chiefs or they just want to hear about their team, but I'm really interested to see what you guys think. So give this a watch. Let me know what you think there, and let me know if you want to see the other half. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you next time.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the last of the AFC West, NFC South crossovers this week here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Bill Riccette, joined by Ryan Tracy, as we are talking the Panthers and the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Ryan, great to finally get a chance to work with you, and I'm sure it feels so good to hear people say defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs, right? It's not getting
old. Thanks, man. It's nice to talk to you too. It's been a while since we tried to do this, and I gotta say it's nicer to hear you say it than when I say it. So
exactly, get that outside perspective, right?
Right.
But yeah, it's just been a crazy offseason. Hopefully you guys are all staying safe over there. What a wild ride it's been so far, hasn't it, man?
It's so atypical. It constantly has me thinking about how they can counteract this lack of time in meeting rooms and et cetera. I know it's throwing me for a loop. It's got to be crushing these teams.
Oh, it's I was just reading the article the other day from Peter King about the virtual classrooms and how they're trying to set it up. They were talking with the Chargers offensive line, so they're doing what they can and we're doing what we can, but that's why we got the crossover here. We're going to talk Panthers and Chiefs, which should be an interesting matchup. I think on paper, obviously the Chiefs definitely have the advantage. There's no doubt in my mind. I'll just come out and say right now, I think it's pretty obvious that this is the toughest game on the Panthers schedule. I think for pretty much every team on the Chiefs schedule, they're going to say this is their toughest game without a doubt. But I mean, the Chiefs, man, they what a run, and they are not showing any signs of slowing down. I think the first question I want to ask you, man, is what can they do for an encore? I guess that's the big question right now, is what can they do for an encore? What do they do to get back and win the Super Bowl again?
Well, that's exactly what they're intent on. They started that run it back hashtag. They're all serious about it, man. Like, every player on the offensive side of the ball has been consistently open to whatever they got to do. They were able to re-sign Sammy Watkins at a much reduced rate that gave them the cap to do some of the other things they needed, like get his teammate Demarcus Robinson back, a player that I thought was going to have a much bigger market out there on the open, which he didn't. So they got him back super cheap. They have their entire receiving core back from last season. They have Travis Kelce and an upgraded pass-catching TE2 in Riccette Joins, who I know a lot of folks are going to say that's not much of an upgrade, but, every little thing counts, right? And then they go and they have a draft where they add another weapon. So clearly they are focused on the offensive side of the ball first and foremost, and, man, they just want to make everybody's life terrible.
Absolutely. And one of the first names that pops in my head in regards to making life a living hell for other teams is their first-round draft pick, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, boy, he was one of my favorite running backs to watch in this draft, man. And I don't know if he could have landed in a more perfect situation than in Kansas City. I mean, Andy Reid compared him, basically said he's a better version of Brian Westbrook, and Brian Westbrook was one hell of a running back when they were together in Philadelphia. So that's a scary thought. What were your thoughts as you're following the Chiefs draft, you're getting there to 32, who are some of the players you thought could have been an option? And then when the pick was Edwards-Helaire, what were your initial thoughts, and what do you think of this pick going forward?
I had a lot of guys, and I did a ton of mocking, and honestly, the Panthers kind of screwed up a couple of things for me, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But, I mean, there were a number of options to go. Clearly, what the Kansas City Chiefs decided is that they did not like the cornerback class as much as I did, because there were a couple of options that I could have seen them going at 32 at corner to try and rebuild that position. But again, like you said, the fit is just so good for Edwards-Helaire in the read offense. He can do everything Andy wants. He is, like, if you put it on paper, he's the prototype back for Andy. Small, quick out of his cuts, catches all the time, solid pass blocker. He's got room to improve there, but enough that Andy doesn't have to worry about it. And quite frankly, the whole Westbrook thing kind of threw me, because I liked him a lot, but he was not my top back. Not by a long shot, actually. And I'm not one that is a proponent of running backs in the first round. I think it's difficult to get your value out of them there. But when you look at clearly a philosophy in this draft that they wanted to make that offense that much tougher, you're right, there's no better fit. So I have to give a tip of the cap to him, because I heard rumblings about a running back, a day or two before the draft, and I think they shocked most teams that really didn't think that they'd go and do it.
Yeah, and from what I heard, it sounded like this was helped by Patrick Mahomes too. It sounded like he went to the coaches and was like, "This is the guy I want." I don't know how you heard about it.
Yeah, it's really neat. And neat makes me sound old, but it's a cool scenario, right? Because you have a 60-year-old head coach, you have a barely 40-year-old GM, and you have a 24-year-old quarterback, and the trio of them get on the same page pretty easily. And that's kind of like one of those things where you can see the smile on Brett Veach's face when he's like, I'm going to send this tape over to coach, and he's going to lose it, right? And that's where that conversation came, where he said, hey, I think you're going to like him. He reminds me of Westbrook. And that's when Andy Reid replied with, he's better than Westbrook. And that's shocking. But then it's kind of like the icing on the cake when you just text the quarterback and, like, top of your head, don't think about it, who do you want? And it's the same guy. So if anybody has some reservations, and even for somebody like me, I probably wouldn't have made that pick myself. I would have tried to trade down into, say, the top 8 of the next round and still try to get him if I really wanted him. But to have the 3 of them all steam ahead in one direction, that I think that should really signal not only to Chiefs fans, but to league in general, that this is where they wanted to go, and this is something that I think is really going to pay off for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and overall, I mean, they didn't have a ton of picks, but I thought they did pretty decently throughout the whole draft. Just skimming through the draft picks, or the other draft picks. Willie Gay they got in round 2. Lucas Niang, who I thought was pretty good value. Niang was a guy we thought could have went maybe in the second round. He ends up falling all the way to basically the end of the third to the Chiefs. L'Jarius Sneed, the safety out of Louisiana Tech. Mike Dana, D end out of Michigan, and then Dacarius Keys, pretty intriguing corner out of Tulane. So, what were kind of your overall thoughts on this Chiefs draft? And, is there any immediate impact guys, or, what's the overall outlook for this draft class?
I think it's really interesting. They had a really strong draft class last year. So they plugged a lot of holes with cheap contracts there. And I see some big things coming for guys like McCole Hardman and Colin Saunders and guys that needed a year to play into, right? But so that leaves them probably less holes that you can really project that they need talent at. And they got, like we talked about, they got the guy, I call him the smile guy, because you can't see Reid or Veach talk about CEH without smiling. And then they got back to business and kind of addressed some things that they can see down the road. Willie Gay's a right now player. They needed to get better in coverage at the second level as fast as they could. And here's the thing about the Chiefs, and you'll have fan bases around the league actually, throw some dirt at them for taking chances on players that have some suspect pasts. This whole thing with Bashaud Breeland right now, you're getting a lot of shade of that. A lot of misunderstandings still about Tyreek Hill, even of all things, who's been basically exonerated of any wrongdoing at all. It just goes through a pattern that it's a player-friendly system. Coach Reed has faith in people and believes in second chances, and they did their homework on Willie Gay Jr. They talked to him multiple times. They pushed that rule of the 3 hours per week in contact leading up to the draft, and that made them feel comfortable. So that's a guy that you say that this staff, this personnel department feels they can plug right in. That's what they're going to do. I expect him to start at will and to start probably next to Anthony Hitchens in the nickel from day one at this point. Reggie Ragland's a player that I really liked in Kansas City because he's a downhill, punch him in the face kind of guy, and that's what I like. But they don't. They needed the coverage, and so he's easily there. I thought that Niang went right where I had him on my board, within 5 picks of where I had him slated. I was a little bit hesitant because of the labrum tear. That's always something that you got to watch out for. He says he's 100%. This is a really tricky one because of the offseason that we're experiencing. Without having to have your doctors be able to put your hands on him, I think that changes things a little bit. So I would have probably had a little hesitation myself, but clearly they loved his film. He's a powerful guy. I'd like to see him get a little bit more fit for this system in terms of being able to get out in space. But I don't think he's terrible at it. So I see him as a swing tackle until one of the Chiefs' older tackles retires, but we'll see where he comes from. And then you get guys like L'Jarius Sneed. I don't know if you want me to go through them all. I'm just on a roll now. Sorry, man.
Go ahead. if you're cool, yeah. If you want to run through them all, by all means, go for it. I'm all ears. I'm interested in your thoughts on them.
The guy I'm pumped about is L'Jarius Sneed.
There's been some. I've heard some good things about him too. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, super versatile. Played corner for 3 years, then played safety his senior year to try to help the team out. Obviously has the visual cues to play safety, to play in zone, which Steve Spagnuolo played 53% man last season. I feel like he wants to go back a little bit more zone. I don't have any concrete on that, but that's just my feeling. So I think that plays into that a little bit. He's got the speed to go along with Henry Ruggs that just came into the division. And quite frankly, he's got the long arm levers that he can deflect balls. And that's what it is about. The Chiefs are very cognizant of arm length and how much you get your hands on passes. So I feel like he's a great fit. Same with Bo Pete. Keys is a guy that I think is a longer stretch. They had hoped to get him as UDFA, and it really came down to a scramble that they just felt they weren't going to be able to get back up to get him. So they went ahead and drafted him, and more power to him. So I think when you're weak at linebacker and safety, linebacker and secondary, and you come away with 3 players in those positions, I think you have to count yourself lucky for not having to have spent a first-round pick.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that kind of leads to, I guess we'll wrap it up on this here on your end. How much of this offseason too was about, obviously staying at the top, but knowing, especially, with a little bit of hindsight on this question too, with the drafts and the off seasons that the rest of the division had. I mean, there's a lot of speed now in this division. I've touched on this with, all the other guys in your division. I mean, the Raiders, you just mentioned, they go out and get Henry Ruggs. The Broncos double dip a receiver in the draft with Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler to go with Cortland Sutton. The Chargers have a great wide receiver group. So, how much pressure do you think this kind of put on the Chiefs to really attack this offseason, knowing that, all these other teams are building all this speed, building up their offense to basically, because it doesn't feel like it's about, stopping them on defense. It feels like more they're just trying to keep up with them on offense. They're saying, we're going to win games in shootout. If we're going to beat you, we're going to score more points than you.
Yeah. The Raiders tried to add some linebacker depth, and I think that'll help them a little bit. But clearly the Chiefs didn't feel that the secondary group in this draft was up to par, that they felt that the value was there. That's why they didn't spend a top 100 pick on them. So they said, in that situation, we're just going to add to what is already a strength for us and make teams score 40 points. And if you can do that, then more power to you. We'll try to stop you a little bit. But this addition is really meant to just solidify what they have, to let everybody step into another year down the line. I think Mecole Hardman has some maturation that has to come because he hasn't played wide receiver that long. 3 seasons now, 2 at Georgia and 1 at KC. He's got to get those side adjustments. But when you have Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins on the outside and Travis Kelce that's running down the seam, you have opportunity. And so I do feel like that all is coming together. And I think you're going to see an offense that's more productive than it was in 2019, more like it was in 2018 in terms of points scored. I think that's the way they went to go, and they'll address defense when they have to, when they see an opportunity to add somebody, probably next draft, that can really be somebody that can make a low level, a draft pick investment in and get a big return on.
Yeah, and if they find a way to be more productive on offense, then boy, I'm almost ready to start handing them the Super Bowl title now, or at least put it right in front of them and say, it, here you go, it's yours for the taking. I mean, that's a scary thought, that they could be even more productive on offense than they were last year.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm one of those that I do subscribe to the idea that you're the champ until you're not the champ. So
Absolutely.
calling them the front runner, I think, fits.
Absolutely. That's right. Yeah, you're the Kings until somebody knocks you off. And it's very tough, especially in the AFC. I mean, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of teams right now that can really kind of hold up to the Chiefs right now. Obviously, the Ravens are going to give it a run, but there doesn't feel like there's a lot of teams that are going to be able to keep up for a full season with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, the Ravens are a scary team. I thought they had a very good draft.
They did.
I like what the Broncos and Chargers did in the division, so that's going to make this division, for those of your fans that don't know, this thing always comes down to nonsensical games where teams that shouldn't be in it are beating the snot out of somebody, and they're all tighter than they ought to be. So I won't put anything past them.